This Hangout on air is live. I like seeing that message because it means I'm not struggling with Hangouts anymore. Hi, everybody. Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome. This is your first time too, right? So hi. Before we get started, newcomers.
There's a
little bit of delay, but
you're opening the rift.
Little Q&A. Little QA. Thank you for the quality assurance. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Why are you here? How you doing? What do you do?
My name is Gene. I'm an IT manager / administrator.
Where at, if you can say?
What's that?
Where at, if you can say?
I am currently in between jobs.
Okay.
So I'm doing some consulting.
Okay.
Awesome. In the meantime, I thought just to keep myself just knowledgeable and just stay active.
Nice.
So this is my first time here, so I hope to learn some new things or contribute or whatever.
Cool. I did that for a while. The company I was working for went out of business, and I started consulting, and it was actually a lot of fun. Actually, yeah, I enjoyed working with different setups and different clients. And,
yep.
But yeah, you have to kind of keep up. And tell us a little about yourself.
John MacAdmin. I've been in New York working at TechServe for many years.
Oh, yeah.
In their little professional services department there, and we split off a couple of years ago and started a company called T2. It's the same people, just doing professional services around New York.
Oh, nice.
For years. And then about 10 years, and I started listening to the MacAdmin podcast.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Tom Bridge, I know, is part of that.
Yeah. Charles Edge and those guys. And, I was happy to see there's a meetup in New York, so I followed it up, and I've read MacTech for many years, so I recognize your name and stuff. So.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that because TechServe was a really big part of the community for a long time. Yeah. TechServe, I don't know, does everyone here know TechServe?
I don't.
You two might not being outside of New York. But
I used to work there too.
Yeah, TechServe, for those of you who don't know it, I don't know if it was the oldest Apple-related.
That's their latest,
right?
Claim to fame, which is that they were the first sort of repair shop, before the Apple stores.
That focused on before the Apple stores, and they had when they first started. I don't know if you were there in the old location.
Yeah.
But they had this location that was like on the
fourth floor
of this building, and they wired up the elevator. That when it got to their floor and opened up, it played the old Macintosh chime.
Nice.
It was really cool.
There was a cage there.
But this was also like the Radio Shack of Mac stores. You could go there and say like, I need a SCSI 2 to FireWire cable, and they'd be like, oh, here it is. Like they had every crazy adapter, or you like. I need Mac monitor to DVI, like these. Remember that old Martian monitor port that was on the Macs, because Apple did things, their own way. They didn't before they adopted like USB and VGA.
Yes,
it was like, oh, this proprietary stuff. So TechServe was awesome. But the other great thing about TechServe was they allowed all these community groups to have meetings down that little basement area.
Yes, and had the meeting room. Yes,
Cocoa Heads, New York.
Yeah,
is now held here,
right?
But it was a TechServe for years and years and years. So yeah, I'm glad to have you, because TechServe was definitely a big part of like the New York Apple scene.
Yeah, that's where I went to get my first parts. Because they didn't sell Macs for a long time. You can only get parts. So.
Right, right, and then they sold Macs. And did repairs, services.
Yeah.
And I know Aaron now, right, has split off. He's doing ground control.
He is. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's good to see people, moving on from there, because it's a shame it closed down.
There's still a core of us that were in the enterprise and business-to-business sales hanging on, but it's a shame to lose the service desk and the retail.
Yeah, but again, for the people who hadn't seen TechServe when it was around, it was like, you would walk in and there was that wall of
radios,
old classic radios, but like the SE Max. It was just like a whole wall of them. They collected all this crazy stuff.
Even towards the end, when it kind of like, evolved into like the upper part of the store being like having like a grid all the way around it. Kind of reminded me of like an alien movie spaceship. Aliens movie, franchise. It looked like that inside.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely very, very.
It was fun when they would release OSs and people would line up outside.
Oh yeah.
All that sort. Yeah.
When you had to get an OS on disc.
You had to get this. I have to buy the box.
So,
Dating yourself. Wow.
yeah.
Night of the Tiger.
Yes.
Yeah. And our other new member.
My name is Philip. I just joined the MacOps team. I've been writing tiny amounts of code for Santa.
All right, cool. So you were just in a meeting that I was partially in for most of the time. That got me to thinking, how do you know you're doing the right thing? Do you compare yourself to other teams? Do you read books and follow their advice? How as a tech, I don't mean morally, I just mean like from a that's a whole other discussion, I think. But as a technologist, how do you know, I don't know, there's a bit of, and I mentioned this at my talk at Mac DevOps, like I can dispense all this advice, but then I look at myself and I go like, I'm not really even great at following some of that advice myself. So sometimes you hear people give you advice and you're like, yeah, I know. Oh, wait, but I'm not really even doing all that stuff. Like, yes, I know, but I got all this other stuff to do. So I don't know. Like, how do you know you're following the right tech path? Is it just stuff isn't crumbling and you're happy, or how do you measure yourself? I think it's a good question for the tech community, particularly the Apple community.
Find someone that's smarter than you.
Yeah.
Get feedback that way.
Yeah, and happily, for people that are consulting or whatever, I think there are groups like this that are happy to hear those questions. The MacAdmin Slack channel, I think people there would be happy to have you bounce ideas off of them. But yeah, it's something I kind of struggle with a little bit, I think. Just because of that, like, yeah, I know, leave me alone, I get it. But then, I got to kind of do it. And it's something.
Apple. We know we have to use an NDM.
Yeah. That's another discussion.
Well, this guy this morning in the monkey room was like, yeah, I'm pseudo curling to put the monkey middleware from master at this URL. And then we're like, he changed the identifiers now, so your preference domain won't be read. Sorry, you were curling from master. Yes, you were curling from an HTTPS URL, so you weren't 100% owning yourself if you can trust SSL to work. But you can't trust SSL to work, so don't do that. Like, that's crazy, dude. And he was like, I'm getting better, though. Like, thank you. I can tell now that is definitely I'm being cut. I'm getting cut by these sharp edges. So I appreciate the fact that someone's pointing that out to me.
I think that's a good example because maybe that points. I was thinking like really big picture stuff. Maybe the answer to my question is you just have to keep talking to people and find, sometimes it's these little things, right? Like you could be doing a lot of things right, but then this one thing that everyone else kind of points out like, maybe that's not the best idea, right? Like, and you can't know everything. And it can be really tiring over time to keep up with these little, well, don't do this, don't do that, do it this way, don't do it that way. I don't know.
With my org, it's like every next thing we do, every time we get to reassess the next time, we're doing something. We need to set up a new type of service because we recognize the fact that we're missing this. Let's just think, do we want to do Spinnaker and put it across 2 clouds? Like, maybe we don't need that. Maybe we just need to learn Terraform. Like, maybe we don't need that. Maybe we just need image deployment. Maybe we don't need that. Maybe we just need containers. Like, we strip it all down and say, is that appropriate for the next step? That the next decision we make will actually be a little bit better. Because like stasis inertia is a bad thing. It's a powerful drug.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's just about like getting out of, like shaking yourself out of the rut so you can move forward.
Yeah.
In the first place is one of the harder things. So if you have to move, if you're already like pushed to move, it's like, okay, can we at least roll in the correct direction or a better direction than we are currently pointed right now?
And yeah, that's a good transition. But before we make that transition, I think the other thing that I struggle with is planning versus spontaneity. And like we're always being pushed to like plan and, you know, write up a document and say what you're going to do. But the flip side of that is you can get too far down that road, I think, and that stops you from doing some ad hoc things that someone might request of you. Or, you know, like I'll go back to Santa as an example all the time. Like, yes, there was a planning doc, but before we did any of that, it was just a quick proof of concept. Like, hey, let's write a kernel extension. Oh, hey, we can capture file events. Oh, hey, we can extend it to do this. And okay, maybe now we need to write up a formal doc. But so many times I think you're asked to formalize things before you've kind of experimented. So,
Well, I mean, a proof of concept is always an important part of planning. Where that falls in during the documentation or design doc phase can vary, but it's definitely important to have. Yeah. Sometimes you do that first and then say, okay, great, now let's spend time on design.
Now I'll figure it out.
Sometimes you're like, well, you know, I'll work on this design ahead of time and then maybe do a proof of concept after the fact, just to make sure what I wrote down is the same. Sometimes in the middle.
Yeah.
I think they're both important parts.
Do we like procedures? Like what procedures do you?
I think there's a range of
on your own?
There's a range of things I guess I'm thinking about. One thing I'm thinking about is just you know, particularly here at Google, if you want to implement a new system, you really have to write up a design document, how you're going to do it and what the scope of it is and what your goals are, and then you need to circulate this document and get other people to comment on it, and you know, then maybe they're going to say, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about that? And you know, before you know it, you're like, I just wanted to write this thing, and now 6 months down the road of like discussion and not quite getting anything done.
Right.
Which, you know, there are some good reasons to do that, but at the same time, there's some for me personal, like frustration of like, let's just start writing code, or like let's start doing something, right? So there's that, and the other thing, you know, I know other companies do it, but Google is sort of big on you planning out your next quarter's worth of work. And again, there are some really good reasons to do that, and it helps in a lot of cases, but I'm also finding that allows teams to sort of say, like, if you make a request of them, they're like, well, we didn't plan for that this quarter, so try to get in our queue next quarter or the quarter after that. And
Q5.
Right, yeah. It just sometimes moves things so far along where I think, at least on the Mac team, we've tried to remain pretty flexible. Like, we plan things out, but if someone requests something, we're usually like, yeah, we'll do that. Like, it makes sense. We'll go do that. Like, we don't get too fussed about, well, it wasn't in our plan. So, I don't know.
I think proximity to the tiers of help desk kind of will shape that attitude as well, because you recognize that your perception is kind of judged by your ability to be responsive and your ability to have that type of inventory of time to do so.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not that applicable to us, but it's a good point. And it's not that applicable mostly because, like, we have a great support org that deals with most of the sort of like, have you tried turning it off and on again type problems?
Yeah.
We don't see that type of stuff. But you are right that that's another planning process where every few months the support organization comes to us and says, well, over the last 3 months, we've been seeing this type of issue sort of become more prevalent. And then we go, all right, we'll try to help you fix that, if it's something we can help fix. So, I mean, there is a nice cycle there, but for the most part, we're a little bit insulated from, I can't print. You know, like,
This is my first
Yeah.
gig where we're in a completely different org. Like, we're not even in the same reporting structure.
yeah.
But like that just means that we don't deal with phones or services like that. Woohoo! But it doesn't mean that they're not one of our most like critical customers to deliver to.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we go back and forth in how much we kind of consider support like our customer versus like end user. And, you're right; they're really our customer in almost every way. So
are you're all Google?
No.
Google,
Google
other, and online, because we're being watched.
Wow, harsh man. So yeah, speaking of inertia and transitions, the Kextpocalypse is potentially upon us.
I keep reloading TN2459.
So do I.
Yeah,
Like, give me more.
So do we. Apple might be making some suggestions that this will be solved if you're on an MDM, and our inertia is that we are not on MDM right now.
I don't know what this issue is.
So,
so-
SECL is the reggae way of it's SECL that secure kernel extension loading. It's SCEL. Secure kernel extension loading in 10.13 means that at time of install, you will have a GUI prompt before a kernel extension kext load will actually load the kernel extension. However, as with all things Apple, it's kind of partially applied because there's a whitelist.
Right.
And for enterprises that want to make sure that kext will be there, you get a volatile piece of NVRAM that you can write team IDs because like the ship way already sailed about whether or not you need a signed kernel extension. Now it's that if you want the team IDs of the certs on those kernel extensions to be whitelisted, to be automatically allowed to run at system boot, then you can go ahead and add that to the pre-boot environment by having that hardware have its NVRAM modified. So if somebody clears NVRAM, surprise, you no longer have those whitelists in your kernel extensions.
So yeah, but
won't
to even be
run.
more specific, like if you haven't seen it, this is
So it's
in
public.
the 10.13 betas.
Okay.
Yes,
100% like
yes, this is
publicly
public.
available.
It's in the 10.13 betas, and it looks like it's going to show up actually in High Sierra. And the issue is that if you try to install something that has a kernel extension, no matter how you do it, whether you use the command line in the background or you run an installer, what I installed that popped up, Little Snitch, that installs a kernel extension, and you run the installer, and you get this pop-up from the operating system that says, hey, this thing's trying to load a kernel extension. Go to System Preferences Security and approve it.
You figure it out.
Yeah, you figure it out, because the pop-up doesn't say, do you want to allow this? It says, go do this thing, and it doesn't even bring you to the security prep pane. So you have 30 minutes to go to the security prep pane yourself, and there's a sort of not very obvious thing that says, Little Snitch or whatever kernel extension it was, approve.
Okay.
And you need to approve that. If you don't do that, that kernel extension is silently blocked, and you need to run the installer again. So even for consumers, it's a problem because it's not a great UI. But like Alistair was saying, there is a whitelist that Apple currently controls. So I don't think they're going to throw vendors under the bus, right? I think they're going to, Sophos and ESET and some of these antivirus products and printer drivers that require kernel extensions or whatever, right? They're going to get white. And Logitech, there are some Logitech mice that use a kernel extension.
So
Hey, mice.
hardware devices seem to have made it into the
Yes.
whitelist already.
Right.
We do not
Printers
know
are there.
of any other security product specific stuff, any at all, whatsoever. It doesn't matter if it's a 3-letter organization that's an Apple customer that's using it or anybody else. There is no preferred nation status.
What about a 6-letter company?
What about that's a rainbow logo?
So the problem for
We're 6 letters
us,
and rainbows too, but
the problem
We're
for us as a company is that we write a number of kernel extensions ourselves,
Right.
and we want to deploy them to our fleet. And right now, if our installer comes along in the background, like it normally does, end users get a pop-up that say, hey, do you want to approve this thing? And guess what? If they don't approve it, it doesn't load, right? Like they override our management capabilities. So that's a problem.
Right. So you're hoping for like somehow to edit the list, the whitelist,
Yep.
or something.
We've been
Yeah.
begging Apple for some solution.
Yeah.
They've heard it from a number of different admins at a number of different companies, like, please let us do this. And maybe that'll get solved with MDM somehow. We don't know. But like, we have to get on the MDM train at some point anyway.
Right.
But it's a big,
now our hand seems to be forced.
yeah, we're gonna have to do
Time
this
constraints.
a little
So
faster.
that's a setting that you could go put in.
Right.
Well, no.
So in theory,
Profile.
the hope is,
Yeah.
well, not the hope. A hope is that Apple would give machines that, a DEP enrolled machine that's kind of talking to an MDM, they would be able to then manage that whitelist using a profile.
Right.
Right. But that's assuming that all your machines are in DEP and you have an MDM that's connected that can do this.
Right. Has anybody seen anything on Profile Manager that, like any of the High Sierra server stuff that might?
well, I mean,
have
they're,
that kind of
it's
setting?
this. They're talking about non-existent, according to anyone's public or like shadow knowledge exists because there's no hook from MDM client to this
We
framework.
said it right now. Yeah.
Period. So like
Right.
a bridge has not been built,
Mm.
and we're on beta 5. So it is August still,
Right.
but the ships are most likely sailing.
Right. So I mean, this makes things, so
So even
upgrades-
with like DEP, MDM promises, those
maybe,
those
but,
are
that might be later. Who knows? Like, I don't know. Apple, of course, will like this whole thing. They're
Yeah.
not telling anyone anything. Even when they are, it's very kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and it's so tedious and boring.
So yeah, I'll say. Well, so first, Victor in Slack says, and what happens with your Macs, which are not in DEP? Restrict them from 10.13 or buy new Macs? Like, yeah, that's a really good question. Not sure, but I think from a strictly consumer point of view, like I have a home machine on High Sierra and it's been okay, but from an enterprise point of view, this is the first time I'm kind of worried. This is the first time where I'm looking at the not so much the quality, but like what's going on in the beta between APFS bugs and the kernel extension thing, where they kind of keep saying like, well, we haven't figured it out yet. I'm like, you're gonna ship this thing in a few months? Like, I'm a little surprised, although I don't know if anyone saw on the iOS side, they made a big change in beta 5, which up through beta 5, if you wrote an app that used your location, the top bar would turn blue, like all the time.
Yeah.
In beta 5, they're leaving that choice up to the developer if they want to turn the bar blue or not, which I don't know, why bother? Because if you're a developer, why would you opt into that? I wouldn't. Also, not because I don't want people to know I'm using location, but because I think, well, most other developers probably aren't going to opt in. Why make my thing look completely different?
Yeah.
Right? So it's a strange option, but they're stepping back from a pretty big decision, right? They're stepping back from a decision of like, yes, we're going to let users know if you're asking for their location. So it shows Apple can, change course pretty late in the game. So I don't know.
Well, it's like we don't have anything Profile Manager. We don't have SIU period beyond being able to run what you used to be able to run. So no mechanisms have occurred about this particular workflow, not even some Apple script, not even some wonderful shell wrapped in Apple script. The bridge is not there, so it's really hard to say that they'll even be able to get anything going by like 0.2. Like,
Yeah,
there's no short term, we're going to make this shit sandwich taste any better. It's just is what it is.
So the bridge that is there, that's not there. There is
This is MDM client being able to do SIP protected stuff.
Yeah, so there is when I was looking into it, I know I'm not in that Slack channel anymore. I should probably go and talk in there for a little bit. A couple things.
Talk about protected nation status, preferred nation status.
There is a mock XPC service that you can connect to that is protected by an entitlement, where you can update that.
Oh,
so
yeah,
with an Apple signed entitlement could update that whitelist. So I imagine there are easy ways to do that for Apple.
Yeah, I think I did mention that somewhere in the Slack channel. Like we were poking at this, and Tom wrote a proof of concept client to go talk to that thing, but it's protected by an entitlement. So Apple could pretty easily
be like 5 lines of code.
Yeah, write a client that goes and updates that. So Papayan in Slack says, the overall feeling with these things for me is that it just wasn't thought through too much. Like you said, have a proof of concept period before you nail it down to a final spec. Yeah, and I agree. I think Clay has said the same thing a few times. Like this really should have been the 10.13 should have been the release where they said, like, really, kernel extensions are really, really, really deprecated. Really, really.
In 10.14, we're going to block them in this mechanism, and you need to work with us to figure out how to stop using kernel extensions. Instead,
this
feels they kind of threw it over the fence and made everyone free.
Probably 10.14 is they're gonna take it away altogether.
Well, now, but sure. But
and then Vaughn Miller says, it feels to me like groups in Apple aren't talking to each other.
You got it. You got
it. Yeah, they don't do that. That's how Apple works. Yeah. So Kextopolis. That's where we're at.
What was that cartoon where it was like the internal structure of different companies and?
Oh my gosh!
Like, but one of them
that was old, right?
But one of them I think was. I want to say it was Oracle, and it was like little groups of dots with like guns pointing at each other. And I feel like that's Apple at this point. Like no one, these giant silos, and they're just like nervous about anything. It's not talking to each other. Like from a security point of view, I appreciate the effort to reduce kernel extensions.
Yes, absolutely. Like
I understand the reasoning. I thought obviously, and even beyond that, just from a stability point of view, kernel extensions can add, a lot of. I'm sure Apple gets tons of random bugs. People complaining, my Mac is crashing, and it turns out it's some random,
third-party thing.
So I can understand the reason why they're doing this, but the way they're going about it is awful.
Yes, I mean, to put a positive.
It's not even my opinion. It's just objectively awful.
To put a positive spin on it, I think the high-level umbrella view is Apple's doing a pretty good job with security. Certainly much better than they used to. Really good on iOS, and the Mac, they're trying to make these little steps kind of towards what they're doing on iOS, right?
Yeah, and there's a bunch of stuff happening in APFS and Secure Enclave that I'm super excited about. I'm sure they're gonna do something horrible with that that's gonna but I still think the possibilities that are there are great.
Yeah.
I think this whole Kex thing is it's good and it's good security, but I think it's also a really, really small problem that they're solving.
I would agree. Like
the amount of bad kernel extensions out there, because you have to just specially plead to Apple to get a signing cert for kernel. Like not every developer can make a signed kernel extension. You have to actually sign up. Here's a form. Here's what I'm doing. Okay, great. Here's your special signing cert just for kernel extensions. So there's already a gate to get through there. It's not just anyone with $100. So I don't feel like this is a big problem that they're solving. I don't know.
Does anybody even know of any kernel extension exploits on the Mac?
No, there was.
Well, I mean, once a kernel extension gets loaded, it can pretty much do anything, right?
Sure. So there was one a couple of years ago that was doing some shady stuff.
I think synchronicity. Papayan just said DocMod. Only rogue kernel extension. Like, I kind of remember that one, but I mean, maybe Apple knows something we don't. What do I know?
Have you heard of this product called Santa?
Yeah, Apple hates that.
Well, it's like with File Vault, they took Symantec What was it? It was Symantec, and they essentially ate PGP's lunch.
Yeah.
And it was totally, everyone was like, sign me up. You want to take that burden off of me? Hallelujah. And it wasn't great for enterprises when you couldn't programmatically interact with FD at all on launch for the entire revision. But it's like, it's not like stuff stopped working or Symantec doesn't know how to catch up after it's been released, because they could and did. But then it's like XProtect, Gatekeeper, Rootless. All of those things had communication around them.
Yes.
That was, we want you to want this, so we're not going to make a shit sandwich out of it. We're going to show choice to begin with. We're going to let it cook out for a little while. We're going to pretend like we're going to do versions with the XProtect plist, and then we're going to abandon that, but who cares? We're going to move to Yara. We won't even tell anybody. Like, there's so mine ways in which they were doing right things, and like poorly implemented, but maybe we'll do it this better. And like the sine wave around the level of which they were delivering for enterprises was okay. It was at an okay buffer above crappy.
Yeah.
But this one is just like, between this and APFS, it's like down to below below a tolerance line.
You just brought up something I was thinking about the other day, and I was thinking about documentation, like system documentation, and Apple is really poor at, like you just said, hey, we're going to switch this thing and not tell anyone. Like, we switched from OpenSSL to LibreSSL, or whatever, right? Like, and we didn't tell anyone, or we moved these functions around. And I mean, maybe all this stuff is documented inside of Apple, but I feel like the Mac community has to do too much work to figure out what's going on and document the system. And maybe it's always been that way, but it feels like really wrong. So like we all always have to reverse engineer things to figure out what's going on, or even if it's not reverse engineered per se, but people just have to like always go spelunking and write up a blog post like, oh, I found this thing, and this plist controls all these things. I don't know, it's tiring. I don't know why Apple just.
Is this part of a bigger move?
Hey, Ed.
Yeah,
can you hear me?
fine.
Oh, hey, hi, hello. I'm remote. My camera doesn't work. Don't know why, but more QA problems. I just wanted to bring up too. Speaking of documenting things, it's probably a good thing to bring up since this is a monthly meeting. That after Apple patched the Broadcom stuff, they silently did not include the 10.10 and 10.11 OS updates. Just basically did not get the Broadcom updates, and that is completely silent. Other than you have to deduct from the security update notes that only 10.12 gets it, but then we have to once again dig in there and figure out by hand that yes, indeed, they did not get updated. And that's dangerous, because folks get a security update that's like, oh, okay, 10.10, 10.11, we're covered. But a major issue has not been covered, and you'd never know unless someone makes you think about it.
Right, and even before the Broadcom thing, there was that firmware. There was that other firmware.
Thunderstrike.
It was
no,
the PCI leech.
Yeah, exactly. That was
right. That was another one of like Apple sent out security updates and whatnot, but you really had to kind of come back and deduce like, oh, well, it really only applies to these machines and newer. So yeah, I would love to see some greater like documentation around that. But I think what I'm talking about is like really just specifically like documenting the OS and what files are where, and like, I think anyone who used classic Mac OS, right, like way back in the day, like you could like name every file under the system folder, and there was just a handful, and you knew what was going on. Now there are too many to like keep track of on your own, and it feels like.
It seems when they did the 10.4 PowerPC to Intel, they documented everything, and since then nothing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you run dtrace now, or You just watch what was
Well,
going on with newproc.d, and there was just like a fire hose of crap, and it's like Taurus D is doing why? Like,
yeah, that's
what
another
is
thing. As
even
system
happening?
administrator, you know, I mentioned Little Snitch earlier. And like, that's a great thing for a sysadmin to run and try to see what your machine is doing. And yeah, all these daemons pop up. You're like, what is this? And there's no man page for it, and there's no anything. It's just like, tell us a little bit about what's going on. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why that's the case. And Victor, yeah, posted. One of the most annoying things about MDM is knowing that Apple has these extra testing modes and utilities for testing client-server interactions, but they don't share them with developers, users, or document them. So you have to run a full end-to-end type test just to find out if something works. Really tedious. Yeah, true. And yeah, I don't think anyone, even a third party, has come up with something like that. Like, that would be really nice for a third party to come up with, but I don't think it's very profitable. So, and if Apple wants to keep the enterprise games, they need to be more transparent. Yeah, I'm not. I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, we're here to make our end users' lives easier, and you know, the changes that Apple will be implementing, I mean, maybe we can sustain them, maybe we can't. If you're okay with them, you're going to continue to roll out Macs because your customers demand them for whatever reason, maybe for good reason, because they're in art or video or something and you use Macs, or because it's just their preference. Yeah, I don't know. We're in the state where losing the ability to roll out kernel extensions will be a big problem for us. And our security team will at some point say, no, we can't roll out Macs at Google. So,
or at least Macs will not be a trusted platform.
Right.
Your Mac will be essentially the same as your personal machine, same access.
Right.
Is, you know,
so they'll be.
Look at your email, that's about it.
Yeah, there'll be problems with that. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. That, I mean, enterprise games, I don't even know what that means, because Apple doesn't really care. Like, the only time they've ever said enterprise has been in relation to iOS. I don't think they've ever said enterprise and Mac in the same sentence.
We're happy if they just say Mac.
Kind of. You know, well, it is sort of the same thing, just like the kernel extension thing. Like, we're happy to move away from kernel extensions if they gave us some other way to do the things that we're doing in kernel space. That would be fine.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with iOS. Like, it seems like Apple, you know, wants to move to iOS, but I can't do the things on iOS that I do on my Mac. So that's the bridge that they need to gap. That's the gap that they need to bridge. Strike that, reverse it. Right? Like, if they gave me the ability to do everything that I do on my Mac on iOS, well, I could move to that as a platform, but I don't know. I don't know if I want to. So there's that. Anyway, questions? Did anyone come here with anything specific that they're struggling with or want to discuss or have questions for the admin? Or,
at what point do we start rebranding this meeting to
iOS admin
iOS
monthly?
or help me find a job not in a Mac administration monthly?
I don't know. It's a good question. Like,
Mac Rock.
yeah.
Well, speaking of which, where do you guys think there's Apple or Mac OS and iOS. Do you think it's going to merge? In which way? Obviously, it will merge at some point. But which one will give it the most?
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I mean, I've heard from people at Apple sort of off the record that have said, hey, you know, people keep saying we're going to just merge the two platforms. No, we love the Mac. That won't happen. But they're clearly bringing more and more iOS-like functionality to the Mac. And in some ways, that's great, right? Like, the touch bar Macs, not that I love the touch bar, but having Touch ID and the secure enclave, that's fantastic. It looks like they're taking steps to bring secure boot to the Mac, like they have on iOS. Great, that's fantastic.
Ish.
Yeah, ish.
Probably fantastic.
Probably fantastic.
Change is good, right?
But I like,
Change is good. Say yes to every offer.
There you go. No, but I do like, SIP on the Mac.
Yeah.
Inspired by iOS. Like, I like that. There are a lot of iOS-like things that I like on the Mac. The reason I say that I can't use an iOS device as my main device is, well, there's no Xcode. There's no terminal. Yes, there's SSH clients, but there are so many times where I'm like, I need to look up how this works. Just pop open terminal, start digging around, right? That's what I mean. Like, we need to reverse engineer so many things. And maybe if we all moved to iOS, we wouldn't need to do that or something. But there's still, also like, I want a decent keyboard, right? Like right now, I'm finding like I'm really sensitive to when I travel, how much stuff I bring, right? I just want the fewest number of things. And when it comes down to my iPad, it's expendable, right? Like, not a great keyboard. Like if I only have one device, I'll bring a 12-inch MacBook. Boom, done. That does everything I want it to do. It has a terminal, it has sort of a real keyboard, it stays upright on my lap instead of like flopping over like an iPad with the Apple keyboard does. Like, the iPad's good at certain things, but for me, for my job and what I do. So I don't know if they'll merge them, but there are definitely a number of things that need to be brought to iOS before I could consider those things merged. Or I don't know what a merge looks like with, maybe Apple will pull, what is it, like on the Windows side of things, right? They have all these like the yoga and it flips around and becomes a tablet or
Touch
breakaway
screen,
screens, like
hybrid.
Yeah, these hybrid things. Maybe Apple will do that. I'm not sure. I doubt it, but maybe that's what a merger of these things looks like. I don't know, but if they do actually merge them, I think that's a ways off, right? And maybe even before we see an actual merging, we'll see ARM-based Macs, right? Apple has changed the architecture of the machine out from under us before, so
Twice.
yeah, twice, right? Like maybe that's what they'll do. Maybe it'll be ARM-based Macs. Now you can get your apps.
And they'll document everything.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. Okay. In the Slack channel, Andy says, Apple has been extremely clear that the OSs will not merge. And he posted a link in the Slack channel to an article on Mashable. Apple has no intention to merge iOS and macOS, says Tim Cook.
That was 2 years ago.
Quote, we don't believe in having one operating system for PC and mobile. These operating systems do different things. And yeah, you're right. 2 years ago, right? That's forever ago in technology time. And, Apple changes their mind. That's the thing. If you see a stylus, they blew it. Hey, here's the Apple Pencil. Right. So, I mean, smart people change their mind all the time. And they can say, well, you know what? Things have changed for whatever reason. And now we're going down this path that we said we would go down. So, I don't know. What do I know? Who knows?
Yeah, ever is a long time. So, I mean, who knows what will happen. But I don't see them really merging into one thing because they do, like the article said, they do different things.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Mac Pro did different things.
Yeah.
It stopped them from pretty much.
Yeah.
Ruining that.
I had lunch a few days ago with a guy that I used to work with, and he's still in the video business. And I hadn't seen him in a while, and I kind of forgot because I stopped paying attention to that world a little bit. Like, I have a Mac at home, and I run Final Cut, and that's fine. And he was just telling me, like, he's like, Apple's killing me, right? Like, the Mac Pros can't keep up, and they're not the latest generation. And he's just like, it's so sad, right? Because Apple had the video market, and apparently, I didn't realize. I remember when Apple changed from Final Cut Pro to Final Cut X, and right, they changed the file format, and your old projects weren't compatible. And I remember hearing an outcry, but not being a professional video editor, I didn't I didn't care. But so this guy tells me, he's like, maybe not film so much. Film, you're pretty much back on Avid. The film world moved back to Avid. The short form people moved to Adobe Premiere.
Premiere, yeah.
Which was a huge surprise to me because I hadn't heard of Premiere in such a long time. But like Final Cut, it's just like people are like, screw you, Apple, right? Like, what a huge misstep. I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, I was just, I've been interviewing with one of the top interactive digital agencies, and their workflow has moved from Final Cut to Premiere. And it's on a Windows platform.
Wow.
Yep.
You know,
You can stick a whole bunch of RAM in it.
Souped up, Windows, especially Mac machines.
Yeah.
Yeah, desktop design in the last year.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, Apple clearly had their hand forced to say like, no, we're coming out with this new Mac Pro sometime next year. Don't worry about it, it's coming out.
We still have a lot of customers in creative and video. A lot in New York, especially, jump to Premiere.
Yeah.
There's rumor that LA is still clinging to Final Cut 10, and they're still using that, and it's kind of, people are actually enjoying it. It's kind of having a resurgence.
I love Final
LA.
Cut, but again, I'm not a professional video editor, right? It's great for my needs, and I've learned the keyboard shortcuts, and I'm pretty quick with it. But, again, I'm not a professional. So
like part of it was, Apple, not that the change was necessarily bad, but the change was big enough that people decided to reevaluate. And because something else was better.
It was like starting from scratch.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
people were like,
because I mean, I have my unrelated non-technology anecdote is I had Comcast for years, and then Comcast called me and said, hey, if you switch to blah 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 triple play, you can save like $10 a month. And I was like, all right. But that got me thinking. I'm like, why don't I get something else? So I looked at Verizon, and I got FiOS for like $30 less than that with more stuff. And I'm like, all right. So then like the next day I called and like right after I re-upped on that. I was like, because I wouldn't have done this except they asked.
They told you to.
They wanted, in this case, they wanted to offer me less, more for less, and I said yes, but it turned out that got me questioning everything. So, you got to be careful when you make a change. You might have one of, maybe you think everything's great, but that's going to make people think about, well, maybe I should look at Premiere. I don't know.
They're making a change, and they're reacting to the competition to try to keep their business.
Now, what would we do if there was only FiOS or only Comcast?
Yeah.
And, we wouldn't be able to bounce them off each other like that every time.
Other questions?
No, I was excited to see that Mac sales did well this last quarter, and that there seems to be some excitement about the Mac again.
Yeah,
I think the Mac Pro looks pretty great. And we'll see
see what it turns out.
We'll see if it's just like smoking, or somewhere, just with all this.
No, I think they can do. I think they can do a great job. I think they were caught by surprise that people didn't love that the circular Mac Pro or that.
They had a good 6 months.
Well, they kind of had to, that they chose the wrong, multiple GPUs.
I know.
Was a thing, and it turns out that people know we want one really good GPU and a bunch of, a really fast machine.
Yeah. Also, they didn't update the thing.
That was the other problem.
So
if they came out with a version the next year that had a newer GPU.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of those sort of, Johnny Ive designed his head up his own, whatever was the thing. Because sure, it's pretty, but expandability's crap.
Right.
So I think if they could see it to themselves to design something like the old cheese graters or something like that, where you could maybe actually, hey, the video card's old, I can put a new one in or add a second one.
Absolutely
or,
agree. Well, they're calling it
an actual PCI slot.
Yeah, the Thunderbolt 3.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that'll help some. Yeah, absolutely.
10 gigs is huge.
Yeah, and PCI.
Yeah, exactly. Right, the external PCI chassis. Whatever.
Yeah,
those are interesting.
40.
They seem weird to me, but I'm glad they work.
Yeah, we just put some in on the Windows side, which is great. You put 4 GPUs on the box and just have
the room lights dim every time you pass it.
Work with an electrician, yes.
Yeah. put 4 NVIDIA 1080s in there.
Yes.
The whole,
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, it
don't have
makes
to
sense.
like extra air conditioning in the room as well.
No, but they have, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
The
We're
new
gonna
Mac
move on.
story is still also kind of unfortunate with the coordination that's going on, that you have EOS distributed with the OS, because they're in lockstep as well.
Yeah.
Life is really kind of difficult for people that said, okay, you sent me this off of a shelf that was running an older version of the OS. I put the newer version of the OS on it. Now EOS needs to update, even though I didn't even touch EFI because they're out of sync now. Like the new hardware way of shoving an entirely different, essentially, product inside of this aluminum chassis is weird, and it kind of makes the really old, the first time around of can Apple actually get their crap together fears were, can they walk and chew gum at the same time? Can they get to this place where they're doing these dynamic things with the Mac so they stay interested in it and not actually screw the entire thing up? Not make it so that you bricked it. So like you hear about like the Apple Pencil that somebody had too old firmware.
Yeah, if you
in the pencil.
Yeah, in the pencil, and
Yeah.
if you missed like 2 updates,
Yeah, you
It
missed a
won't
certain
you
window.
could not update that the pencil again. It was basically just dead. Like the actual real definition of bricked. Like cannot use it. Not like bricked, but if I reflash it, it's fine. They're like, yeah, sorry.
I had a similar thing, which I don't know if it was the firmware. I think the firmware was up to date, but I was going to the Apple store and I had a coworker say, I have this Apple Pencil that won't pair with anything. Would you, if you're going over there, ask them to look at it? So I said, now what are you talking about? So I plug it into my iPad and it shows up right away and then disappears. And then shows up and then disappears. I was like, okay, he's right. And I tried it with another iPad, same thing, wouldn't actually pair. So I went to the Apple store and there's like the world's smallest serial number typed along. Honestly, the guy took out a loop to like look at the serial number.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, does this pencil, it's from Nicholas. I was like, oh yeah, it's my coworker. And, he asked me to get it repaired. He's like, yeah, well, it's out of warranty, so we'll fix it for $79. They knew it was $99. I'm not giving you $79 to fix this. So I brought it back unrepaired. Like, I don't know. But yeah, that was like a frustrating thing. Like the thing's not that old. It might be out of warranty, but it's not that old of a product.
Like armchair outside of the company quarterbacking, how many products they can have, how many initiatives they can have, how many tests they can write for their code, how many QAs they can throw at the App Store as well, which is going to be a higher volume of stuff going through that they need management around. It's just kind of, it's murky. You get no external idea of what is going on necessarily about how they're running their internal corpse, but how many products you put out, like this thing, it's so great that I have this thing that I can use for 4 or 5 things every day.
Yeah.
And I do every day, and they work reliably most every day. But it's kind of, it's almost like, okay, maybe the focus that you say you have, you need to actually prove by either doing less or doing slower, or
yeah, actually, I want to get
they
back.
can get themselves into really weird corner cases where they're bricking parts of their product line.
Yeah, and actually, that's kind of a good transition. I want to get back to something I forgot earlier to mention about High Sierra. That's going to be sort of biting us a little bit. I don't know about anyone else. But we currently image our machines using ASR, Apple Software Restore, just by creating an image, blasting these bits down to disk. Apple is telling us, yeah, it might not work in 10.13. In 10.13, you really want to run the installer on the hardware that it's intended for, particularly because of the touch bar. It gets the right stuff onto the touch bar. So
I heard that imaging in general is going to be harder.
Yeah, well, for us, imaging over a Thunderbolt by blasting bits to disk takes like quite literally like 30 seconds.
Wow. No, yeah.
It's crazy. This was the best move we were ever, because we used to do NetBoot.
Yeah.
And just loading the OS for NetBoot takes 4 minutes or something,
Yeah,
right?
that's
This is like,
in a good network, it was 4 minutes.
yeah, on a good network. So, but Yeah, so now EFI updates get missed if you're not running the installer on the target hardware. That's another reason I think they want people moving to MDM, because now you can just take sort of a stock machine, MDM, use MDM to shove a bunch of updates down, but it's going to be a major change for us figuring this out.
So, and I mean, that's a good solution when the OS ships encrypted with Apple's signing key and you know, secured by the secure enclave from the factory. Because right now, if there's a pallet of Macs being shipped from somewhere and it says to Google, that's a huge target for someone to like take this machine out, target this mode, you know, change some things, put it back in, wrap it up, and then now, you know, if we don't re-image it, we don't know what happened to it between the factory and there. I mean, probably nothing, but you know, we're justifiably paranoid.
So yeah, the Slack channel is sort of confirming everything we're saying. Papine says, yes, Apple doesn't want you to blast bits to disk because FE updates get missed. And with 10.13, you have to get those FE updates landed. Stuff breaks with APFS if you don't.
Yeah.
And Victor says, yeah, the MDM is a good solution when they fix the 4 to 5 major bugs in the software update MDM commands. So yeah, Apple's in this weird position of like they're trying to move too fast. They want all these things done, but they don't have the methods for you to do all the things that you want to do with what they have.
Yeah, and it's not even the long tail stuff. It's like Victor said, the major stuff.
Yeah, there's some major stuff. So anyway, more High Sierra stuff. So all right, questions, thoughts?
Is anybody planning to actually install High Sierra anytime soon?
Oh, most of us are running, yeah.
Well, I mean, in production for your users.
So
we have one running in Japan that we didn't know he upgraded his work machine because we had admin users. Just Megro, there's somebody who just didn't need his work machine to be in service.
Yeah.
So if they need a reimage, guess what? They're going to get a new piece of hardware because they just screwed with the firmware of the machine.
Yeah.
And that's our cost of doing business and letting everybody be admin. It's going to be fine. I don't know that we'll be able to support on day 0 because so much of the story is still to be continued.
Yeah,
I think that's most people's stories.
Yeah,
it's like a hard place to be in. Whereas other people were like, yeah, they're definitely not going to do that. They're definitely going to allow us to do this. And it's kind of like, but neither of those things have happened. So it's still just like a big old open question.
Yeah, I think we're in the same position. Like before WDC and some of these announcements that we knew, my plan was like, man, we were going to get out ahead of this time, and we're going to have a big group of pilot testers, and on day 1 that retail releases, boom, we're going to be able to have everyone, you know, on High Sierra. And now
overnight.
it's like, we talk to Apple, and they're just like, yeah, we're still making it up as we go along. We don't know.
It's also like the people from Apple that will speak to us, they'll slum it with us, aren't people who have the answers.
Yeah, that's the
They're not
frustrating thing.
they're not the people who will actually be able to give us any type of gauge of what's happening internally about
Mostly,
specific things. They just know what our side of it
Right.
and what they want us to hear.
We say we're using ASR to restore images. Will that continue working? And they will not say, no, you must do this.
Right.
They'll kind of say, it's not supported.
And then they'll say, let's gather that impact data.
Yeah, or, you know, what'll that mean? And like, you know, we recommend you
And
do
I don't
this way. I'm
mind
like, no,
doing
what does that
that.
mean? You recommend that we do this. You've been recommending this way for a long time. We're doing this other way, and it's much better. Just like, what was the, you know, the Ryan Reynolds, just tell me what you want. What do you want? Tell me what you want.
You guys use drives to?
No. So we allow any Mac to become an imaging station, and you take a big stack of Macs and put them in target disk mode and plug them in, and the imaging station just boom erases the disk and blasts a bunch of bits to disk. And Victor says in Slack, oh, one last thing. DEP portal was down for several hours earlier this month. Yes, it's not a great sign, but at the very least, that's not impacting your MDM per se. That's impacting you being able to assign devices. So I'm not defending it. It's kind of crappy, but it's not as bad as it sounds, I think. And someone else, Microsoft might be eating Apple's lunch soon, and he points to this Windows document. Like, as much as I gripe about the Mac, I still don't want to be using anything else, right? Like, that's my thing. Like, people can point, like, Microsoft's on fire. It's like, yeah, but then I have to use Windows.
I don't want to use a 2-button mouse. Come on.
I mean, Windows has gotten a lot better, and people who like it, hey, more power to them. It's just not, I don't know, too much muscle memory now on the Mac for me, maybe, and too much domain knowledge. I go to use a Windows machine, and I'm just like, wait, how do I put the icons on the desktop? Yeah, it's like the most basic things. Yeah, the most basic thing. I'm like, how do you do this?
Yeah, my wife's Windows laptop was having issues. Now I was trying like, how do you update drivers and the system control pane somewhere? Update this, download, go to this, go to the other UI, update the thing, make sure that.
Yeah, there's 2 different versions of Control Panel, which just makes perfect sense to me. Like, why would I want to be able to do it one way when
I can do it too? But
I can figure out which one doesn't have all of the options?
there was a question earlier from Groove on the Slack channel where he asked if to Salajander.
Oh.
Okay. If you'd share what you're trying to do with your DEP workflow and the issues you've run into, either due to micro MDM or MDM specific docs.
Well, just mostly I think the documentation was written by someone who knew everything, so it took a while to like wrap my head around the things that I did. I was in that Donald Rumsfeld, I don't know what I don't know thing. I don't even know the right questions to ask to start with. But once we got, I just started haranguing Victor and Group on Slack, and that got most of the stuff going. And there was some confusion on the certificates because you need to set up a certificate for the MDM itself to talk to DEP. Also, a couple of days ago, I was doing some testing, and it was not, the machine was not talking to MDM for like 2 out of 3 times. I would like start up the VM, it would go to the configuration assistant or setup assistant, and it would just like not do the MDM setup at all. Just keep on going through the rest. And then I would reboot it, and same thing, and it would work, and then it wouldn't, and then it wouldn't, and then it worked. And then lately it's been every time. So I'm like, that doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. Because now, we're gonna drop ship a Mac to someone, they're gonna open it up, and maybe 1/3 of the time they'll actually get our packaging, and it'll be configured as a Google Mac. And if it's or they'll get the default setup assistant, and they'll set up like a personal machine, thinking that's the right thing to do. And we'll say no, and now you have to reimage.
Yeah.
Start over.
I suspect drop shipping might be a ways off. Like, even with DEP and MDM, our inventory is still going to have to unbox them, make sure they do the MDM, and do an initial setup for the user, and then ship it along, because there are too many points of failure, and a machine doesn't know it's in DEP until it can check with the network. So the way around DEP is just don't
check. Don't have a network connection.
Don't have a network connection. Do your setup, and then the Mac doesn't do its equivalent of activation, right? So you can get around DEP really easily. So drop shipping might be a ways off. I'm not sure. Woo. All right. Questions? Coming into our final holding pattern here. I usually wrap up with events. The only 2 major events I can think of that are coming up on the calendar, Max Sysadmin in Sweden. Great conference. There are still tickets left for anyone who might still be thinking of going to that. It's the first week in October. And then there's the conference that I'm involved with, MacTech conference in LA, mid-November, November 15th, 16th, 17th. I would obviously love to probably add that to my calendar. Yes, add that to your calendar, because you're going. I've been talking to people about speaking, getting ramped up on that. So I'm really, really excited for this year's event. If anyone has any other events that they know about, like, we do this every month. So come back next month, join us.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. The MacAdmin's podcast has a little events every time. And then
that's nice.
They have a good list of everything as well.
There's no Casper users here, are there? Jamf users.
I'm a camp user.
Yeah.
JNUC's coming up.
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh, okay, JNUC. I always forget about that because I don't attend it, but I hear it's a really good event.
Yeah.
Like, it used to be free, but they moved it.
Yeah. Now it's $600 or something.
Yeah. But I hear for if you're into that ecosystem, then I hear it's a really good event.
Yeah.
They announced the talks.
Surprised that Apple hasn't purchased acquired.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I'm not sure if they need to. They're kind of like the only game in town, right?
Right, but they have nothing other than Monkey.
Well, there's a lot of MDM out there.
Yeah, AirWatch, Mobile Iron. A lot of them don't specifically deal with the Mac, though. That's one pain point, right? So
They all do profiles, though.
yeah.
So more if they move to profiles, the more.
Right, and like in my head,
MDMs.
like that's all, if it's an MDM that has a root agent that does a bunch of other stuff, that's not an MDM. That's
true.
That's just another agent doing things.
Yeah.
I mean, MDM in my mind is a XML delivery system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
It's management over UDP.
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, you'll find Casper's sort of the only game in town. Yes, there was LandRev or
Oh, that's
Absolute
still around.
Manage.
Absolute
Absolute
Manage.
still
That's
out
the other one, right?
Yeah.
There were a bunch.
The Chase.
Oh my gosh, are they still around? Case.
I think Dell purchased.
Yeah,
it.
yes,
Dell.
definitely a number of years ago.
Absolute Manage got bought and then it's gone under.
Okay.
Yeah, Avanti.
But I was going to say, once again, the Mac community tends to rise to the occasion, and there are some great open source tools. We're using Monkey here with almost 90,000 Macs, right?
Oh, wow.
So it's larger than a lot of Casper deployments,
Oh, yeah.
right? So we love the open source solutions. Victor has been writing micro MDM to have an open source MDM solution. One of the things I love about our team is that we try to open source as much as possible, right? So we've open sourced Santa as a security solution, Cauliflower Vest, and after Cauliflower Vest, Graham Gilbert came along and wrote a tool called Crypt. There are two open source file vault escrow solutions out there. Perhaps there needs to be a single source to go point to all these things. I'm not sure, but open source in the MacAdmin world, I feel, is incredibly robust and vibrant, and there's a solution for almost anything you can think of. So that's great. That thing for sure. About to crack.
It's been 2 years. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm
Just
like, oh,
It's
sorry,
not out
Amanda.
yet.
I got my phone today. I'm gonna have to buy the new one.
All right. Anyone else? No? Going once, going twice. All right. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next month.
Thank you.